Hi, this is Kate, Teen Services Librarian at the Brighton District Library. This video is going to be a recording of our recent virtual teen baking club session in which we learn how to do Gummy Bear Heart Cookies, and here are all the supplies you'll need.
So to start out with, you're going to want to grab your sticks of butter and put them in there. If you want, you can cut them, but I'm just going to put them in whole. Just want to make sure they're fairly soft. The softer they are, the easier this is going to be. So, 2 sticks of butter. This is a very buttery cookie. If at any point you get lost, need me to repeat something, just go ahead and give me a shout and I will. Then we're going to have 2/3 cup sugar. Open my sugar bag and I'm going to use my 1/3 cup and I'm going to do 2 scoops of this. And you are going to want to measure them because while I measured out the baking supplies while giving to you, they are not exact. I just wanted to make sure you have enough of every ingredient in there. But it should be, the sugar will be pretty close. So if you get a little more, a little less, it should be okay.
Okay, so this next part you are going to start mixing your butter and your sugar together. I'm using a hand mixer in this and I'm using a circular motion and just mixing it around until I get a nice light fluffy texture to my dough. I'll show you at the end of this kind of look, but it's gonna be fluffy. So I started out with my mixer at a slow speed and then I upped the speed as I went. And at one point I did have to go ahead and stop my mixer and like pull out the butter mixture that got stuck in my egg beaters, just because it was it wasn't soft enough yet, so it just needed to take it out and then kept going. So it's going to take a little bit, but you're just going to keep mixing until it works. If you're using a stand mixer or you're noticing your dough is going up along the sides and not getting mixed properly, just stop for a second and take a spatula and like curve it around the sides to get your dough back in the center and go ahead and start mixing again.
So one of the key things is my mixture is no longer sticking and clumping inside of my egg beaters. There. So, but a lot of it is kind of going on the side. So I'm just going to scrape around just to get it in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to reference my little instruction list here. It's light and fluffy, so at this point is where we're going to add the egg yolk and the vanilla. So you can kind of push aside your dough. I'm going to wipe the hand. And you are going to want to grab your egg, and you need an extra bowl because we're going to be separating the yolk from the white of the egg, and this can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to tap my egg. I don't know how well you can see it. I've got a crack in the middle. And I'm going to push in and I'm going to slowly separate. Now this is when you got to be very careful when you separate it and let the bottom 2 pieces stay together because you want the yolk to stay in one of the sides of your eggshell. And I'm going to move it over fully into this side. And then I'm going to be passing my egg yolk back and forth between the 2 eggshells. And trying to separate out the white. I believe with this one, if you get a little bit of the white in your dough, it should be fine. It's not like a meringue where if you make a meringue and you have to use egg whites, if you get any yolk in, your meringue is done for. So I got my yolk. I did break the yolk when I was doing this, so a little bit dripped out, but it should be fine. And once I have that, I'm gonna dump it right into my into there. Try to make sure that you didn't have a piece of shell go in. I'm just gonna get rid of that. And whenever you're separating egg yolks and egg whites, it is a good idea to do it over a different bowl and not right over your initial dough, just because there's a good chance you're going to accidentally screw up and then you're going to have to restart with another egg. And it just makes your life a little bit easier. Okay, so after that, I'm going to grab my vanilla extract. And this one, we are actually going to be using just a teaspoon of vanilla. And if you're a little bit under or a tiny bit over, it's not a huge deal. If you have more, it's just going to taste more vanilla, which if you get too much, it's going to give you a little bit of an artificial flavor, but it generally isn't too bad. Okay, so I've got my yolk, I've got my vanilla in there with my mixer, and I'm going to go back in and mix this again. So this is kind of what your dough should look like. It's going to be very creamy feeling because of all that butter in there. And now we have the egg yolk. So it's going to be nice and soft and pliable at this point. But it's not going to stay that way because we're going to be adding our flour to it. Now this one is very important that you actually measure your flour as opposed to going in. And we are also going to be adding our salt. So for the flour to start with, we're going to do a cup. I'm actually going to switch over to a half cup because getting the half cup into this bag is going to be a little bit easier. If I can find my half cup. Oh, there it is. And if you do that, you basically just have to double. So like before, I'm going to scoop up my flour. I'm going to try to carefully over this bag so I don't get flour everywhere. I'm going to take a butter knife and I'm going to flatten it down exactly. And then I'm going to poke holes in it just to try to get out any air pockets. There is over there. And for this, when I did the practice one, I used about 2 1/4, which is exactly what the recipe needed. But I probably could have gone slightly under 2. So if your measurements aren't completely exact, it should be okay. You might end up with a crumblier dough or a little bit cakier if you end up with too much flour. But this is a shortbread, so I do warn you when you eat these cookies, they are very crumbly. They're delicious, but they were kind of messy. My dog actually really loved it because she would just follow me around when I ate a cookie. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start out with just 2 cups of flour for this. So I did 4 half cups. And then I'll see if I feel like I need more flour in it. And then before I forget, I'm going to do a half a teaspoon. Make sure it's a teaspoon, not a tablespoon, or else these cookies are going to taste kind of salty and terrible. And if you're a little bit under a teaspoon, it's not too bad. I'm going to put that in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and start mixing in my flour. I'm going to pat it down first to try and prevent the big floof of flour all over. And just like what I did earlier, is I'm going to do that circular motion. Now, something to know about this dough, because it's a shortbread dough, it is going to look like little nuggets. It's going to not be super, super smooth at first. It's almost going to get like a breadcrumby type feel. That for a second so I can show you. So like Mine's looking like this to start with, so it's very crumbly. And we're just gonna keep going with it. So one of the feel that like what I ended up doing, I did this when I did my practice run too. After a while, it's just going to feel like when you're mixing it with the mixer that it's just going to come out crumbly. So I actually just went in for the final part, wash your hands, and then just go in with your hands and start hand mixing it. I found this helped. This worked a little better to get it to form. Yeah, so if you see, it's now more of a dough. So I believe you can still use the mixer the whole way, but there's a chance you'll overmix it, and I just found this works better. All right, so once you feel like you got your dough together, mine's nice and solid, you can go ahead, you might wanna wash your hands if you're like me. I got some dough on me. I'm going to unplug my mixer, clear off a little bit of space here. And I'm gonna grab my cookie tray. And I've got some parchment paper on here that doesn't want to completely stick, so it keeps wanting to roll. So I'm just going to do that for a second. Okay. So now I'm going to grab my dough and I'm going to form it into a ball. I'll just roll it with my hand. It's very similar to when we did chocolate chip cookies. If you were here for the last one, which I think both of you were. Form a ball, set it down, and I'm going to do all of these into a ball. You can try and do exact sizes, but I just try to get them as close as I can to each other.
So I'm just speeding up my video here, but I am just going ahead and rolling all of my dough into relatively the same size little balls of dough and just put them spaced out on my cookie tray. The amount for this ingredients for this particular batch, I think I ended up with about 14 cookies at the size that I'm making them. You could try to go for a smaller cookie or a larger cookie. You're just going to change up the amounts that you have. But this was the size that worked for.
Okay, so this next part is the tricky part. You're going to be using your finger. You can either use the index finger, your thumb, or your pinky. I'm going to use my index finger because my thumb was too big for this, but we're going to be making the heart shape. So what I'm going to do, and I'll hold up my dough, is I'm going to take my finger, press it in there to the side. You're going to see little cracks in the side of your cookie when you do that. And then you're just going to overlap the one. So it's going to give you a little heart shape like that. So you're going to do that in each of your cookies. I'm going to press mine a little flatter down before I put in the heart shapes. So just go ahead and start making hearts using your finger. If you find your index finger seems to be too big, go ahead, use your pinky.
So I'm just going to continue putting these heart shape using my fingers in each of the cookies. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to put them into the fridge and let them chill. For this actual demo, I did it live, so I didn't let it chill in there enough. But I would suggest letting it chill for a half an hour to an hour if you're doing this at home and have the time, because it will help retain that heart shape when you go to put them in the oven.
grab, because I'm going to be cutting things, I'm just going to grab my cutting board and I'm going to grab some gummy bears. Now, each of these different gummy bears have a different flavor to them, so your cookies are all going to taste different. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one that was all red that wasn't like a red hot, like spicy flavor, which I don't think sounds very good. But yeah, you're just going to you can just take a regular butter knife and chop these little guys in two. So unfortunately, off with their heads. Okay, so I've got all my little gummy bears trapped in there. So I'm going to grab my cookies and I'm going to put them in right away. If you want to wait a little bit and let them chill a little more, that helps them retain their shape a bit, you can. This is about the length that I put them in for when I did the test run, and they still held their shape pretty well. So I don't think it's necessary to do a really long chill. There. So then I'm just going to go and take a gummy bear and I'm going to put each on one side of the heart shape in each of my cookies. Like I said, and if you are not a huge gummy bear fan, or just like, I just want some shortbread, you don't have to use all your gummy bears. Or if you happen to eat one, you're just going to have one less cookie with a gummy bear in it. So we're just going to put them in each side of the heart, just like that. Apparently my kit that I grabbed had a bunch of clear ones in it. I actually think I'm gonna do a few of these. I'm gonna do half and half. So I'm gonna have some of mine without gummy bears in them. So move them around. So I'm going to do 7 with gummy bears and 7 without. Apparently that's how my chicken dough. So once I have them in there, I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven. And this is about between a 9 to 11 minute bake. Okay, so I took my cookies out of the oven. They're really hot. Some of them did not, the cookies toughened up a bit. So I'm going to very carefully try to rearrange my like melted gummy bears into a heart shape. The cookies are really soft at this point in time, so if you want, you can leave them for a second to let them cool down a bit, as long as that goo stays hot. So I've got my green one here. Let's be careful, this pan is really hot right now. So while I'm doing this, I just want to be kind of careful. I have my tray on a cooling rack right now, so it's not just sitting on my counter piping hot. And if your cookies looked a little soft, you might have needed to leave them in there a little bit longer. Baking times may vary. But yep, just use your little toothpick. Or you can also use, when I did my test run of these, I used the edge of a butter knife to get these right. But you pretty much just try to get, you just move around your melted gummy into a heart shape of a sort.
Once I have that sorted, I'm just going to go ahead and take my cookies off of here and put them onto a cooling rack. And then once these cool off, I'm probably going to add some chocolate to some of the ones that I didn't put a gummy bear in. And as you can see,